What is up? This is Zombie Talk 123 here. Edwin Jackson is now signed. I want to say that first of all, by the Washington Nationals. This is a deal that I think some people expected. The Nationals, if you do remember, go through his team that he's been with in his career. You see LA, he came up through that system. Tampa Bay, Detroit. The White Sox traded for him in 2010. Why did they trade for him? To acquire him to send in a deal to the Nationals. And if that doesn't work out, they still have Edwin Jackson, a very solid pitcher. So it was going to be a win-win for the White Sox either way unless they overpaid for him. Then they actually dealt him to Arizona, and then they got him back from Arizona for Daniel Hudson, who now is a very good starter for the Arizona Diamondbacks and getting better. So, if you remember that, they dealt for him. They wanted Adam Dunn. The White Sox ended up actually signing Adam Dunn last offseason, a 4-year, $40 million deal, and that has turned out terrible so far. Not saying that is going to end up being a bad deal. But my point is the Nationals have been interested in Jackson for longer than I even remembered, really. I hadn't thought that they, wanted to acquire him in a deal until just now when I was looking at the teams. So that's kind of interesting. The interesting part in this deal, though, is it's a 1-year deal. You see Edwin Jackson, he's moved around, he's traded all the time. He spent less than a day with Toronto. He's been with Arizona, Chicago, Arizona, St. Louis for that magical few months. And he pitched actually very well with them. Had ERA under 3.6 with them, almost a whole point lower. It actually is like a whole point lower than his career ERA. So he had career numbers in St. Louis and in Chicago, actually, under 4 ERA for that. That's, almost a half a run difference in career ERA. And really, though, if you look at his career, he's 60-60, wins-loss. He's not a really fantastic pitcher. He's a very average pitcher, but his fastball is overpowering in the range of 94 to 98 miles an hour. He has a good slider and a few other secondary pitches that he tries to work in there, but he's mainly a fastball pitcher. Now, working with Dave Duncan in the short time that he did, I'm not saying he switched from a strikeout, overpowering pitcher to a ground ball pitcher at all. He's still wild sometimes. He still walks a lot of guys. He does not have the control that he really needs to be able to have the security for a team's sake to go on and sign like a 4 or 5 year deal with this guy. And I think that's part of the reason why you see a 1-year deal. But I think more of it goes into Edwin Jackson saying, I want my stock to go up. This free agent class, it was good in some ways, but the market lately has not been great for me. Or Roy Oswalt. And then the market has gone up a little bit. But I remember when C.J. Wilson and those guys were getting signed, if Roy Oswalt, the best deal he could find right there is probably $6 or $7 million. Now it's gone up to probably 10 he's shooting for. And he might get it. So the market has been slowly withering for relief pitchers. We see Francisco Cordero. How can that guy sign for a $4.5 million deal? Because he was getting desperate. And the Toronto Blue Jays went to this offseason wanting to find a free agent closer. And guess what? He waited for the Reds. It didn't work out. The Reds only wanted to go 1 year. The Reds signed Ryan Madson, and now you're looking at a guy having to accept a deal under $5 million per year. This is a guy who had over 30 saves last year. So we've seen with the market, it can play a lot of tricks, and you have to play it right. But with Scott Boras, you can trust a few things. Number one, he's going to get you signed. It might be very late in the, maybe a few days before spring training, but he will get you signed. And number two, it will make sense for you and the team most likely. And hopefully for the team. But sometimes he has screwed off a few teams money-wise. And really, if you look at this national roster, Danny Espinosa, Bryce Harper, Steven Strasburg, Jason Worth, and newly drafted Anthony Rendon are all Scott Boras clients. So this Nationals team and their GM has had to deal with a lot of Scott Boras. Now, how did they get this deal done? Well, there's not a huge market for Edwin Jackson. Now, there was a few teams, the Red Sox, the Cardinals. The Cardinals, I'll clarify this. The Cardinals were never a player for Edwin Jackson. The only reason why they started to maybe go after him was because of the fact that his price was dropping down to a point where any reasonable team, any team with a reasonable attitude would say, wow, if we could get this guy for X amount of money, under market value, let's go out and get it done. And I think that's why the Cardinals maybe wanted to go after him. It wasn't because they've had this plan to spend $30 million for 3 years, to get him. And if they would offer that deal, I think he would accept it in no problem. He was offered a 3-year, $30 million. It was reported like an hour ago he was offered this deal by a mystery team. My guess is probably the Pirates. But he wanted to win. He wanted to raise his stock for free agency next year. Why? Because he's going to get more money. He's going to get a long-term deal next season. And if you look at next year as an optimist, if you look at what he did last year, if he can build on that and have career numbers again and show what he can do and maybe work on that walk issue, the control issue, then he could get a 3 or 4 year deal. Remember, he's only 28 years old. So again, this is a very average pitcher, but what this does for the Nationals, it improves the rotation tremendously. I mean, this Nationals team, you're getting Jordan Zimmermann back for a full season next year after having an innings limit after coming back from Tommy John surgery. You have Steven Strasburg, who you can't do much better on the free agents market than signing a guy like Steven Strasburg. You're getting him for a full season. And then Gio Gonzalez, you trade for him. So this rotation went from very average, on relying guys like Chang-Mei Wang and other guys like that to fill in those spots, to very good. And they wanted to solidify that rotation. They have a good release staff, with Tyler Clippard and Drew Storen. So you see that starting pitching staff. Now Gio Gonzalez, Steven Strasburg, Jordan Zimmermann, Edwin Jackson, probably the number 4 starter, and then Ross Detweiler and Chang-Mei Wang fighting for that number 5 spot. This rotation looks a lot better than it did before they acquired Gio Gonzalez, and just so much better than it did before they acquired any of those guys. So what this deal does is a lot of things for the Nationals. Number one, it solidifies that rotation. They have a very good bullpen. And actually, last year, there was talk about sending Drew Storen for Denard Span. And I was just, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I'm just not in favor for that at all. Looking at that from the outside, maybe Nationals fan have some better reasoning for it, but I just don't understand how that deal would really benefit the Nationals. I understand Denard Span, he's a pretty good center fielder and could be good for a few years. But when Bryce Harper comes up, Jason Worth, I assume, would play center field, and there's your center fielder. You have a huge contract on him, and hopefully can provide some offense. So number one, your offense hopefully will be better with Jason Worth having a better year. Number two, again, hopefully, and I assume that Ryan Zimmerman will have a healthy year. The Nationals also added Brad Lidge. Remember that. So they have a very veteran guy like Brad Lidge. They have Drew Storen. They have Tyler Clippard. So this is a very good bullpen. They have a very good offense going into next year. A very young offense. Sandy Espinosa, a 20-plus home run guy. Ian Desmond, they're talking about trading him last year. They need him to step it up. He has the ability to do so. They need him to hit 15 home runs and not just hit a few home runs like he did last year. He had a decent year power-wise. What he needs to do is he needs to hit for average. He was really low 200s last year. Not good. He really needs to get up there and hopefully he has a good 2012. But you look at this team, it has a lot of good young players. Those drafts a few years ago when they were, the bottom teams, they really, come in handy. With Steven Strasburg going to have a full year next year, Danny Espinosa to, add on to it what he did in 2011. Bryce Harper could be coming up pretty soon. Jason Worth, obviously, hopefully could have a better 2012 than 2011. They add Brad Lidge. They go and acquire Gio Gonzalez, and now they sign Edwin Jackson. This rotation is set. This lineup is set. It's good. It's young. It's a competitive team. And it's going to be a great team for 2012. And it hasn't been above 500 in a while, so hopefully we can see that happen in 2012. Again, thanks for watching the video. It's MLB Talk 123. If you want to check me out on Twitter, it's MLB Talk 123. No surprises there. I just want to say this. I'm actually very excited to be going on MLB Baseball Blogs, another really good video site, MLB stuff. I'm going on there for the 30 for 30 spring training, talk about the Cardinals. Extremely excited about that, so check that out when they do make those things.